Are you a designer looking for your first design job, or perhaps you're looking for a new challenge? When looking for a new design job, you're likely to see a lot of postings or job openings at various different types of companies. You're probably going to see some for agencies, for startups, for established tech companies, and for other in or outhouse type of companies as well. So what's best for you? What are the pros and cons of each, and how do you know whether you're better suited to a large established tech company or an early stage smaller startup? Your role and the type of responsibilities you might have at each of these differently sized companies will likely vary. I recently had a live stream all about this topic with designer Audrey Charneux, and we talked all about the differences between working at smaller to larger sized companies. Both of us have different experience working at different sized companies, and so we ended up having a really fruitful discussion about what the differences are and what kind of different responsibilities or expectations you can have. It's a 60-minute live stream, so I know it's quite long, but don't worry, I've put timestamps in this video so you can jump straight ahead to a specific topic that you're interested in. This was such a fun live stream. If you want to catch more live streams like this and watch them live in the future, then go ahead and follow me over on Superpeer. If you subscribe to me there, then you'll be notified of any upcoming live streams that I schedule. Okay, enjoy the stream. Hello everybody, and welcome to the stream. It's so nice to see all of you here. I see we have about 50-ish folks that have joined so far. Thanks for joining the stream on a Friday. Nice way to kind of kick off the weekend and end the week. I'm really excited to be here with Audrey, and we have a super exciting topic to talk to you about, all about the differences between working for a large company versus a startup or a smaller size company. As you're all joining into the chat, it's so nice to see some of you from all over, Barcelona, London, LA, India. It's always so interesting to see where folks are joining from. Let me know in the chat where you're joining from, what's the current size of your company, and how many years of design experience you have. It's always great to sort of see the different experience and different contexts people are working in. So why are we talking about this topic? Why is this important? Before we jump into some of our discussion, I just want to touch on this. So this is quite a common question I often get asked, especially from junior folks who are trying to, have the best start to their career. And there's so much to consider when starting a new job. And there's a lot of differences that come with working at a really large company versus a startup. There's a lot of pros and cons, different challenges, different opportunities, and it can be really difficult to decide what's best for you at your point in your career. So I think Audrey and I have some different experiences that we're going to share about today, which will be really helpful. And before we kind of start kicking it off, just to let you know, we are planning to save some time at the end for Q&A. So if you have questions throughout this, feel free to pop your questions in the chat. We may not address them immediately, but I will be saving them and we'll bring them up towards the end for a Q&A. So feel free to pop them in there. And also just a reminder, feel free to share this on social. We love seeing you sharing this. So on Twitter, Instagram, wherever you like to share, feel free to share some photos there and tag us in it. We would love to see. All right, so let's hand it over to you, Audrey. We'd love to hear a little bit more about you. Can you introduce yourself? Tell us where you're from, what you're doing. I'll hand it over to you.
Yeah, sure. Well, thank you. Thank you for having me. Hi, everyone. Happy Friday. So I am originally from Montreal. So if you hear a little bit of an accent, that's where. I'm currently working in LA. So I work for a company that's about more or less 20, 30 people. I think it kind of fluctuates depending on the number of projects we have going on. And I've been a designer for about 3 to 4 years. And I work currently on a project that's more healthcare related. I have a background as a therapist. So I was, when I got started, I was really interested into starting more of a healthcare, tech, wellness startup. So that's where I'm at.
Awesome. Yes, it's so nice to talk to a fellow Canadian, though I'm not Canadian, but based in Toronto.
Yeah, I wish I was there right now.
Yeah, well, super nice to have you on here. And you actually were the one that reached out to me interested in doing some sort of collaboration. So I'm really excited and glad that we got to put this stream together. So thank you for that. Awesome. Well, for those on the stream who maybe don't know me, maybe you heard about the stream through Audrey. So I'm Femke. I'm a product designer at Uber, working specifically on the Uber Eats team. I've been there for 3.5 years now, which feels like a lifetime in a big company. Yeah, I mean, a bit of context about the size of Uber. Like, thank you for sharing a bit about the size of your company. I actually don't know the exact number, but I believe Uber is maybe like 20 or 30,000 people in total. So it's quite a large company, a very global company. We have offices all over the world. And it's been around for a while. Obviously, I think just over a decade now, Uber has been around. So it's relatively mature-ish in the context of tech and Silicon Valley startups. I don't really call it a startup anymore. It's, we're kind of more in that like mature tech kind of stage. So yeah, it's very large, very, very different to working at a startup. I actually worked at a startup before I joined Uber, a very small startup called atomic.io, and that was like 15 people. So it was quite a bit of a culture shock for me when I went from a very, very small startup to this giant organization. And there's been a lot of learnings and interesting challenges and opportunities along the way for sure. So let's maybe start by talking a little bit about the differences between you at a smaller company, me at a larger company. Let's talk about like team sizes and structure. Can you talk a little bit about the size of your design team? Like, who do you collaborate with? What are the different roles you have? Anything in that would be interesting to hear.
Right. Well, right now, we have 2 designers part of our company. But I would say that usually I'm like the only designer working on the project. Sometimes we collaborate just to get like another pair of eyes on the project. But in terms of like leading the whole design process and doing the research, that's all me. So I'm like the UX team of one, for better or for worse.
Yeah.
And I think like it's really nice because I get to collaborate firsthand with a lot of like with the chief technology officer, with our development team, with our project manager. Like there's no person in between really in terms of communication. Right. So I would say like on a daily basis, the people I collaborate the most often with is about, I think there's like 4 or 5 people that I would say daily basis we touch base and we have meetings together. And our development team is a bit larger, so I don't necessarily communicate with all of them. Also, some of them speak only Russian, so
that sounds challenging.
Yeah. Between me, who English is not my first language, and multiple people in our team also, so that's another thing.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's kind of our structure, is that I would say there's like one person for one role. So one product manager, one design lead, one technology officer, and all of that, except for the development side. So
right.
I've heard the term before, though I'm not necessarily a fan, like Jane of all trade. I feel like I'm kind of this person who, I kind of do a little bit of everything.
Yeah.
I don't necessarily feel like I'm master of none, like that's the latter part of this saying, but I definitely feel like I have like strengths and preferences when it comes to UX. So I do like feel like stronger skills like in research, but yeah, I feel like that's kind of a downside maybe of having a smaller team, where I feel like I don't have a lot of like structure around or other people to counterbalance some of the areas where I could grow a little bit more.
Yeah, yeah. And who do you report to? Like, do you have like a design team and like a head of design or something, or at your scale? Yeah, tell me a bit more about how that works.
Yeah, I don't. Well, I'm the head of design of my team, so I report more to the project manager and the CPO. So that's the people that I'll review design with. Sometimes I'll review, the stakeholders are also heavily involved.
Yeah.
So I will review design with them as well. So that's kind of another thing where I also have not like firsthand access to the stakeholders, and will be communicating with them and conveying certain design decisions and all that. So I think that's really nice in terms of like being able to practice presenting my design and really explaining like the reflection behind it.
Yeah.
So that's kind of our structure. So it's like on a day-to-day, it does feel like a rather like small team.
Yeah.
What about you?
Yeah, so for us, we have like a large like design team, like all of design at Uber, I think might be like 250 designers maybe. So it's quite large, but we're split out into different like parts of the business. So we have like the mobility part, which is like rides, you order your Uber, you get in a car. So we have a design team for that. And then we have a different design team for Uber Eats. And then there's also like freight and some other different charters that we have. And so each of those kind of like teams has their own head of design or like design director that then reports, I believe, up to the head of product. And then within each of those teams, so for example, within Uber Eats, we have like another like layer deeper of like smaller teams. So for example, we have a team for like the eater or like the consumer experience, that's like the Uber Eats app. We also have a team for merchants, that's the team I sit on. We have one for couriers, et cetera, et cetera. And on each of those teams, there's maybe like 5 designers on average in those smaller teams. So you can kind of get a sense of the scale, how that kind of grows over time. And so yeah, that's at a high level, like how our design teams are structured. And then I think within each of those teams, like for example, for me on the merchant design team, I like each designer has their own problem space within that team. So for example, I work a lot on our like marketing and growth tools for merchants. And so that's kind of a like area of the team that I'm permanently staffed to. And so I work a lot with like, I have the same product manager, the same group of engineers. It's not like each project, it's a new product manager or a new group of engineers. We're all kind of staffed to this work stream. And that's really nice because it means that you get really embedded in that team. You can like really foster those like collaborative relationships. And then as a designer, I feel like I can get really deep into building a lot of domain knowledge in that area. Like there's not so much context switching for each project. So yeah, that's been really, I really enjoyed that, basically being able to like go really deep into a specific problem area and kind of own that and lead that as a designer. I'm wondering, how does it work for you and the other designer? Like, how do you divvy up the work and like, how do you decide kind of who does what or who owns what when a new project, say, comes to design?
I think often it's more up to the CEO. I was hired for that specific project that we had like more in healthcare. I think they were looking for someone that had more knowledge in that area. And since I was a therapist before, that was kind of like a really good opportunity. And because I had pre-existing knowledge on the like whole healthcare space. So I think it depends of who is available. Like maybe there's a project that, the largest part of like the design, initial design is done. So
yeah,
that person will have a little bit less work. So maybe they'll try to staff them on another project. But that project that I was working on has been taking me like almost all of my time. I was full-time on that project. Now things are slowing down a little bit more. So I was able to be staffed on another project.
yeah.
That's more related to real estate and climate change. So
Oh.
when you talked about context switching, I was like,
yeah,
yes, that's something that I have to do. And yeah, it can be a little bit, there's a learning curve there because I was like, whoa, I've spent quite a while just working on healthcare and really like getting to know like all the language and everything. And all of a sudden I have to get a lot more information on that space and who are these users. So that's completely different. So
yeah,
I think that's definitely a big challenge of like switching projects like that. Because my company is like, I think would fit more into what we call like an agency maybe. So has different, is being hired by maybe someone who already has a product or has an idea, and then will, design it and do like the whole design process and also develop it. So the project I was working on was more of a startup in that sense. And I'm still staff on that project, but there's definitely multiple projects and some of them are a little bit more established within like the company. Yeah. So I think it depends. It depends who has time, and in terms of like maybe prior experiences, like if someone has done a project that's kind of similar, I think they'll like favor that person to work on that specific project.
Yeah. That makes sense. Yeah, we typically, it's kind of because we're in this like embedded like domain model, like a project will come to me and I'll take it on because it's in my work stream. Although sometimes there's opportunities to collaborate with other designers, like maybe the project touches on a surface in the Eater app, for example, and then I'll like get to collaborate with a designer on the Eater team. And that's always really fun when I get the opportunity to do that and collaborate with other designers. You can imagine at a small company, like you were mentioning earlier, that you and the other designer don't get to collaborate that much. So is it more like you get assigned a project, you lead it end to end, and you did mention though that sometimes you give each other feedback and review each other's work. Is that just part of like your design process?
It's a sort of a thing that we more built for ourselves. It's not something that I think if we didn't do it, there was no one that would be like, hey, you should do that necessarily. But I feel like as being a person who doesn't have a large design team, I try to put things in place that help me have an exterior look on my design or,
Yeah.
so I try to get feedback from the project manager or build processes to get the feedback maybe that I want, that something that maybe I would have if I had like a larger design team. So because I don't feel super confident that in me just working alone on my design, that like, oh, I found the best solution.
Yeah.
Because I feel like working for a while on something, sometimes I don't necessarily have the distance to be the most objective. So it's really nice to have other eyes on my design. So sometimes, yeah, I will actively seek feedback of people who are not necessarily part of the main project or my project, because that's been very valuable to do that. But I feel like, yeah, there's a lot of those processes. It's not like built in our workflow necessarily. It's more like proactively, I'm trying to do that so that because I feel like I benefit from that, really.
Yeah, you having to take a bit of initiative, and totally +1 on like getting that perspective and that feedback and eyes on something from someone that's not immediately part of your team, right? Because then I feel like we always have a bit of bias or a bit of judgment. So yeah, that's great that you do that.
I was wondering, like for your team, do you sometimes like ask other design teams who work on other projects to review like something that your team has been working on? Like, or do different design teams like will have like, I don't know, lunch and learn or whatever to show each other what you've been working on?
Yeah, so in terms of getting feedback and reviewing work, we have like design crits just amongst our smaller team. So the merchant design team that I'm on, for example, we have crits every week, which is like a critique session, and we can all come with the projects we're working on and share that for feedback. And so I think kind of the benefit of that session is that we all work on the merchant space. So we all like have a foundation understanding of like, what do our merchants need? What are the goals? And like, we understand the problem area broadly, but I'm not in the weeds of like what my design peers are working on. So that's kind of a good way to get like, I guess, contextual feedback, but then feedback from someone that's also not on the team. And then sometimes we have like higher level like design reviews where that might be a bit more cross-functional. So I might invite someone from like the Eater design team or the courier team if it's relevant to them. Maybe I'm touching a bit of their surface area or want their input. And so I might get their feedback that way. And then in regards to like showing work, we do have a like design all hands every month, I believe, and like certain projects will get highlighted and spotlighted there. You can walk through the project and share it to the rest of the design team. So that's really nice as well to see like across the company all of the different projects that are being worked on.
Yeah, for sure. I imagine also like the challenge of, I know we talked about that a little bit before, but like the challenge of staying consistent, because like I built a design system for
the
project that I'm working on, and I sometimes struggle with like staying consistent or reusing components. I'm really like trying hard to do that, to like have an eye, okay, can I reuse those components at other parts of the app? And sometimes I realize later I could have reused something, but I can't imagine if you're a really large team, like trying to stay consistent and reusing different components in the app, how that might be challenging sometimes.
Yeah, we do have like a design platform team internally that is responsible for our whole design system and platform. And they do have like weekly crits. You can like sign up for a slot and then get your work reviewed by the platform team. It's not mandatory. It's not like every project goes through that process. I think the platform team has built an established design system that the designers like can be trusted to use pretty well. But if you maybe like need a bit of extra help or want to talk about something, you can go and show it to that team to get their feedback. I wanted to ask you a bit about like your day to day, because I feel like for me as a designer at a big company, if I'm not careful, I spend a lot of time in meetings, and like my time left to design gets narrower and narrower to the point where I've had to start putting like focus blocks on my calendar so people don't book my time. What's it like at a smaller company? Like, how do you collaborate with people? What's your day-to-day like? Do you have enough time to design? Yeah, would love to hear a bit more.
Yeah, I think it will change. It's hard to describe like a day to day because I feel like some days will look very different. I would say like sometimes it's more like over periods of weeks or even months where I will have like if I start with the day to day, like to start smaller, I would say that often I have a meeting in the morning with my team for on different topics. Sometimes it's more like development related, like where are we in terms of development? Are there any hurdles? And I'm doing a lot of testing also of the app. So, sharing feedback and all that and how's the progress is doing and answering questions on designs that I've published recently from the development team. So that's often part of my day to day. And then afterwards, often I'll go on our different platforms where we communicate. Since we have like kind of asynchronous communication with our team that's partially in Russia, often in the morning, that's kind of where we have a little bit of overlap. So it's kind of late for them, but I try to answer questions at that moment. So this is where we can kind of have more interactions. So I'll do that, like all the questions about different interactions or design that maybe are not necessarily clear to them. And that's when afterwards, I think I'll get a little bit more into design and research. I think it really depends. Like sometimes I'll have to do a lot of research about, we're thinking based on a lot of research to develop a new feature. Like, will we go down that path? So I'm investigating that, doing like some research, looking at, competitive analysis and all of that. And then I do have often in the afternoon a meeting more with my product team where we'll talk about that. We'll talk about new features, the product roadmap, where the product is going, how it is going in terms of sales. Do we have this big contract coming up where we have to present the product? So there are certain things that need to be ready, or even certain things that I will have to kind of showcase what we can do. So I'll even sometimes work on marketing decks, like just like showing different screens. So that's how broad sometimes my work is.
Yeah.
So so there's like definitely a part that is that like it's a lot focused on the product, and then there's like also the actually designing the product. And I would say that some weeks there's a lot less designs. There's kind of a lull where there's less new features. We're kind of just waiting to see. Depending on the contracts that we may have. So in these moments, I think it's a good opportunity for me to organize my documents, because sometimes like it's kind of a rush, and it's really nice to have a little bit of a slowdown to like being able to organize my documentation and the documentation I give to the developers. And so that I really try to incorporate that like frequently to be able to stay on top and that things are not messy, but also to do some research with potential users as well.
Yeah.
So I like to sometimes build like a research protocol, interview a few people and all that. So some weeks will be a bit more research heavy as well. So it varies a lot.
Yeah, I mean, like I think we got some questions in the chat too around like multitasking in a startup, right? Like you have to wear a lot of hats, and like you said, sometimes you're doing marketing decks, sometimes you're doing UX design. It's kind of like this broader kind of set of responsibilities, I guess, or this broader role. I would say my like general tasks and day to day are very in the weeds of like the project that I'm working on or the problem area or space. I will touch on like, I think something that is unique about a large company that I often get pulled into is like sometimes a little bit of like politicking, you know, like I have to get other stakeholders from other teams on board, or like check that because I'm putting something in this part of the app, I need to go and check with that team that they're okay with that. And so a lot of, not a lot, but there is a part of my role that's a bit like trying to get people on board and like selling my idea, and just making sure that we have all the right stakeholders in the room and everyone's aligned and we get approval. I can't just like put it, like create a design and then like have confidence that we can actually launch it. So there's a lot of that too, of just like bringing people along the design journey with me and making sure that we're all aligned and on the same page.
Do you think that's kind of a process that takes more time? Because I do have to do that as well sometimes, because like there are stakeholders, project manager, and all that.
Yeah.
So there's a little bit of like convincing or, you know, bargaining what we can do.
Yeah.
It's not a process that takes a lot of time, because like within a week, usually I can talk to all of these people relatively easily.
Right.
But I was wondering, like for you, is it a process that takes more time?
Yeah, I would say it can take a bit more time. Like people are very busy and have a lot of meetings. So sometimes to get like a group of 5 people together can take a week based on people's availability and schedule. Or there is like dependencies on certain timelines that somebody needs to go away and find out what that is and talk to their engineering team. So generally, yeah, I would say like getting people all aligned can take a little bit of time. And isn't really something that often happens overnight.
Yeah. I imagine, especially you were saying that you were into a lot of meetings. So if everyone in your company also has a lot of meetings, it's going to be hard to find time for another one.
Yeah, we're trying to get better at async, but that's a whole process. Another area I wanted to touch on is just the hiring process. I don't know how involved you are in like hiring, or how frequently you would hire designers, given you're a very small team. We're often hiring all the time. We often always have open roles. So I'm curious, what's the hiring process like, either like at the company you're at now, or in your experience with maybe if you've interviewed at other smaller companies? Can you share a little bit about what that's been like for you?
Yeah, I think that it's hard to talk from an internal perspective, because we haven't hired a new designer since I was there. So
right.
So I'll talk more about like my experience when I got hired or at different companies. From my experience, it seems to be a little bit more informal. I feel like, because I've interviewed before for larger companies, but in other sector, like when I was working in healthcare, and it seemed like there was really like a process of like, first you'll interview with these people and then with these people, and there was really like that kind of process that was really like prescribed by the organization, where I felt like often when I interview for smaller companies, it's a lot more informal. It's like, even like you can speak to the CEO like over the phone, like they get a quick sense of who you are and if they want to interview you. So that's a little bit what happened with me with this company. First, I met with the project manager. It was really informal. It was over coffee. And then afterwards he was like, okay, it seems like you might be a good fit. So then I met with the chief technology officer, and again with the project manager, and then we got more into the requirements, and they gave me a take-home assignment, which I was really thankful for, because I think like whiteboard challenges, like I would have a nightmare over this. It's like having to perform on the spot. So I was really thankful to be able to like take this home, have time to like think about it, and then come back. And then I had to like explain what was my process, why I decided that, basically almost doing like a design review. And I think for that was really important for me before I went home with that assignment, to like clarify what was their expectation. Like if they wanted like full-fledged, high fidelity, everything, like I'm sure like if I were a perfectionist, I would definitely have gone there. But they were like, no, just do like pen and paper and show us like your process and everything. So that's more really what they wanted to see. So that's kind of how it looked like. Then from there, they made me an offer. I know that they interviewed other people, like they left, the offer up for a while. But so I'd say like I probably had 3 interviews, I guess. Okay. Moments. But yeah, sometimes it's been a lot shorter than that. Like a very small company, I think, just one interview and they were like, okay, fine, So that was a lot like a smaller opportunities, I would say.
Yeah. Yeah, I remember that when I interviewed for the startup I joined, this is like back in maybe 2014, so a little while back now. And I think it was literally like I came in for an interview, we had a coffee, and like that was kind of it. It was like very low key, very casual at the time. Interviewing at Uber, however, was a whole different experience where I had to do a whiteboarding challenge. I also had to do a take home assignment, and I came in for a full day of interviews, like from like 9 to 3 p.m. or something. And
Wow.
I did a portfolio presentation where I presented my portfolio to the design team that was there. And then I had one-on-one interviews with different designers on the team, as well as some product managers and design managers. So yeah, I remember at the time being like very overwhelmed because I wasn't used to such a like intense interviewing process. Generally, like it's still kind of like that today. Like if you come into Uber to interview, it is like a whole day where it's like you do the portfolio presentation, usually a whiteboarding exercises and some one-on-ones with team members. I don't believe we always do a take-home assignment now. It's not as standard, but yeah, it is quite a robust process, and can take a while too. I don't know like how quickly you hear back from startups and things like that. I feel like at larger companies, you can often be waiting a little while. Like usually there's a lot of candidates and they're interviewing multiple people. So it can take a little bit of time to like for the team to assess everyone and like make a decision and make offers. So yeah, it's a bit of a slower process, I think, because of that.
Yeah. How long would you say that took? Like a couple of weeks, a month?
I guess on average, in my experience, like from first interviewing someone to like giving them an offer can maybe take up to a month or like 3 weeks.
Okay.
Usually, like even like scheduling the interview can sometimes you might like schedule it. It might take a week or something. So yeah, in addition, like pre that on-site day, there's usually like a phone screen that I didn't mention, and like you first have like a one-on-one interview with the design manager before they then bring you on site to do all of those things that I mentioned. Um,
Yeah.
but yeah, it can take a little while, unfortunately.
Yeah. And I was wondering, do you like for Uber, obviously you got the job, so maybe they didn't go like into like the feedback of your interview, but I'm always wondering because I've seen people like saying, "Oh, I interviewed for so many jobs in design, and and it was like I got ghosted. Basically, I didn't receive feedback
Mm,
about what happened." So, is that kind of part of the process to give feedback to the people that made it far enough?
yeah,
Into,
I don't know for sure, like so I believe if people have made it through the interview process and we decide not to go ahead, like the recruiter will let them know. We don't just leave them hanging after they've come in for interviews. In terms of giving them feedback, I believe there's some legality around being able to give candidates feedback. So unfortunately, often we're not allowed to give feedback to the candidate, which is really unfortunate because that must be so frustrating for them to like not know why or like what they could improve upon. But yeah, that's how I understand the processes.
yeah, I feel like with smaller companies that I interviewed, yeah, the process is kind of faster.
Mm-hmm.
And also there's more the opportunity of kind of asking feedback at the end. It's more like informal.
Yeah.
So it's not something that I think it's been offered to me, but I was like, do you have any feedback about what happened?
Yeah.
Like, could
Yeah.
you find someone? And I feel like sometimes they just explain who they chose, and that kind of you realize like, oh, okay, I
Mm.
understand why
Like
that's in
clearly
there.
that person's better than me.
Yeah, this person has a PhD.
Right. So yeah, that's funny. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, maybe let's touch now. Let's move a bit forward to like some of the biggest benefits to working at like your size company, and then maybe also some of the biggest challenges. Do you want to kick that off?
Yeah, sure. So biggest benefits, I think it's like opportunities to learn a lot. Like I feel like you have to be very proactive, but if I want to learn something or integrate something part of the project, like I can, I don't necessarily have to get tons of people on the design side on board. Like sometimes I find really interesting like tutorials on YouTube or even like on different classes. And I'm like, I want to integrate that into our documentation.
Yeah.
And I don't have to ask permission to anyone.
Yep.
So I feel like that's really nice to be able to do that. Um, I think it's really nice also to be able to like develop different skills and have like first hand communication with the development team. So I learned so much about the development process, which maybe that's just my impression because I don't have like the experience working for a larger company so far. But I feel like it's something that I would have less the opportunity to do if I was at a junior or mid-level position at a larger company, because then that would be the design lead who probably would do that.
Right.
So I think it's nice to be able to do that, to like lead different like research projects that I decide. Like I can ask for maybe a small amount of money to like carry on a research project that I want.
Yep.
And so being able to do that, I think is really like awesome part of working for a startup. And then I saw like in the comments, someone wrote like, do you ever think about security? And I think, yes, the answer is yes, definitely. I think that's kind of a bit of a downside sometimes of working for a startup, is like you're maybe more affected by the ebbs and flow of like, if we don't get this big contract or if we do. So like sometimes I'm just like, like next year, what's going to happen? Or sometimes in shorter period of time. So I think, yeah, there's maybe like this security aspect, and there's like sometimes I miss this collaboration aspect too. I'm kind of longing for this big design team and to have more design peers and for people to contradict my design, you know, with that design eye that I feel like I don't necessarily have. So I think that's one of the downsides sometimes. Like there are things that I was like, oh, I wish I knew that before, but then like I didn't know I needed to learn that specific thing, and I didn't have like necessarily peer designers. So like I think that was kind of the downside of like learning from my mistakes and be like, oh, I wish someone had told me before.
Yeah, I totally hear you. I feel like for me, my benefits and challenges are like yours reversed. So like some of the benefits at a big company is that collaboration and like having that design team, and you know, there's like people that I can learn from and be mentored, and a lot of like guidance. I can get feedback on my work like whenever I want, and so that's been a really nice benefit for me, and something that I was really looking for when I moved from the startup to a place like Uber, as I was really missing, especially being so junior in my career. Like this is, you know, 4 years ago. I really wanted to learn from other people and felt like I wasn't really getting that at the startup that I was working at. So that's been a really huge benefit for me at a large company. And then I think another benefit for me is the fact that like I'm embedded on this team working on this particular problem area. I personally really like that. I think some people might not like that and prefer more of like a studio model where maybe like each project you're on a different team working on a different problem space. I think it can kind of be a personal preference. I, for one, really like that I can really build that domain knowledge in that problem area, like get really tight with my engineering team, my product manager, and like in a way I also get to influence the product roadmap, and like we have discussions about features we want to build 12 months from now, which like seems so crazy, but it's cool to be able to play that role and like have that effect and impact, which I guess is another kind of nice cool benefit that is important to me, which is like the scale and the impact of the work I do. You know, Uber's a global product. Like sometimes it's kind of crazy to think about a tiny feature I'm working on, like millions of people seeing it, like feels like a big responsibility. Sometimes I freak out a little bit over it. But at the same time, it's like really rewarding, right? And like being able to have that impact. And then I guess some of the challenges are, there's like so much going on. There's so many teams. It's a bit slower, I think, in general to like startups. Like our product cycles are pretty long. I spent 12 months working on a project that didn't ship. You know, that sometimes happens, and that can suck when you put a lot of time and effort into something and it takes so long. So that's definitely a challenge. I want to talk about growth too, which I think kind of like is our next topic around like career opportunities and growth. I feel torn about this one because at a large company, there is a lot of opportunity for growth, but I think it can be more challenging to grow in that environment when there's like a lot of internal competition, expectations can be really high, so it might take a little bit longer on average. So that's something that, like, for me has been a little bit challenging, trying to figure out how to grow, how to level up in such a big like environment with like really high expectations. Yeah, curious what your experience has been there in regards to like career opportunities and growth for you in a startup environment.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of opportunities, but to me, from my experience, it has to be kind of self-created. Like, I feel like I have a lot of flexibility into what I want to do more, but I definitely have to like kind of promote that to my team. And I don't think that someone's going to say like, it's not like someone's going to arrive and say, hey, we have this new position available. Like, would you like to become like the manager of this and that? Because we're a small team. So I feel like in terms of growth, it's really me who's like, I'm kind of like looking at my work or like doing a retroactive into like the past 12 months or whatever, and be like, okay, what do I want to improve and how can I do that? And sometimes it's that it's not always like within my team that I'll be able to do that. I've hired, mentors outside of my work to try to like compensate for the fact that I don't have a design team and to feel like I'm continuing to grow and learn. So for me, I feel like sometimes I can definitely have the opportunity to put those skills into practice in my work, which is really nice. But in terms of learning, I feel like often I will have to go outside and I can't, necessarily seek it for a mentor internally on more design related things. So I'll have to like hire someone. But I think it's really nice too. It's a nice thing to be able to sit down and be like, okay, do I want to like perfect more or work more on my user research skills? So I'll try to seek someone who's doing like exclusively that and we can work together. So that's really fun. I've been enjoying it.
Yeah, that's really cool that you kind of get the opportunity to pave out for yourself like what you want that to look like and make the most of opportunities that come your way and grow into it naturally over time. Yeah, I guess at a big company it's usually like pretty standard, like rigorous process. There's like levels, there's a ladder that you can climb. I think we have like, oh my gosh, maybe 8 to 10 levels. I'm at level 4 for context, so like not even halfway on this ladder. And I think, you can go all the way up to like, there's basically 2 tracks. You can continue as an individual contributor, and then you can go from like senior to principal to staff. And then you can also switch to the management track if you want, and that goes up to, I guess, like a director level.
Right. And how is it established? Like the level, is it the number? Because often on job descriptions, I see like number of years of experience. And is this what dictates where you're at the ladder, or is it like something that what you're able to do basically?
Yeah, it's tricky, right? Like what we have is we have like the spreadsheet that has the levels on it. And then there is like a guidance of like, at this level, you should have like 2 to 4 years of experience. And at this level, you should be like 3 to 6 years kind of thing. So it's kind of vague, I suppose. I don't think it's like an exact science. I guess like years of experience is just one way to measure like design skill and quality of your work. So yeah, like I guess benefit of a large company is there's a lot of opportunity for growth, right? And I can like go into management if I want, or like stay on the IC track and eventually become a staff designer. So that's cool to have those different tracks and those different opportunities. I could in future manage and lead a team if I wanted to. Yeah, I guess like it's a long road. It takes a really long time. So you need to have a bit of patience to get to those.
All right. Yeah, that's interesting. How they would calculate like experience, in terms of growth, like not to broach this topic. I think we were going to go towards there, but of salary also, like just in terms of skills. But yeah, I feel like a larger company may have more. How to say that, like
more resources
of like after resources, but also like after a number of hours or time spent at the company, you can expect if the company does well, like you can expect to have an increase of your salary of that much money, like inflation and all of that. And I feel like for a smaller company, it kind of depends. Like
maybe not.
It can go really fast if you have like a really big contract, but if things are not necessarily going really well, then that may be a little bit more stagnant, or it's more unexpected. Maybe
yeah, that is fair. Like on that topic, like I know to expect like a bonus and a change in my base salary compensation and equity refresh once a year. Like that's like an expectation that's set, and I guess the company ensures there's resources to fulfill that as like a benefit, I suppose. So yeah, I know like there's like questions around like which one gives more salary, and I think that's like hard to give a blanket answer to, but I would say like just keep in mind that a larger company probably has more financial resources available, and I think another thing to think about here is, in addition to base salary, there's other benefits too. There's things like equity, right? And I know of experiences where people have taken low salaries at startups, but a lot of equity in exchange. And so I think that's something to think about too, is like at what stage the company is at, and think about that too, especially in your negotiations when you're negotiating an offer.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's something worth considering if you're going to take a position that has like a much lower salary. Well, do you have like other benefits? If there's no benefits, then yeah, it depends of your level of experience, but that might not be as worth it. But I think from what I've seen, I've seen like startups having like really different like financial resources. I've seen ones where like the salary was much lower than like the average on the market, and I've seen other, maybe they've received, either they are really well privately funded, or they've just received like a really big round of funding. And in these moments, I've seen that they're pretty much competitive. Like they seem to be competitive to the larger companies. It's kind of hard for me to tell. I'm not like exactly sure how much is the average into larger companies. Like I'm referring to, sometimes I've had recruiters offer a certain salary for my level. I'm like, oh, okay, that's not really far off of what I'm making. So
interesting benchmark. Yeah, I do find that generally like larger companies can afford to be a little bit more competitive, and like especially at a moment where like let's say you have two offers and you want to kind of play them off one another, it's likely that the larger company is going to have resources to sweeten the deal on their offer than a startup would. So yeah, just something to think about. But yeah, I think like with startups too, there's also a lot more potential for growth. And so anyone who's like considering an offer from a startup, I would encourage you to highly look into the equity part and what that actually means and what the potential value of that might be.
Right, definitely.
Cool. All right. I think we have like one last little point that we wanted to touch on before we can jump into Q&A, which I guess is just like in summary, and I've seen this question come up a little bit in the chat too. What's your perspective on like which is the better environment for, say, like a junior designer or like someone that's kind of coming into this career? What kind of advice would you give them in terms of like when they're considering the size of the company they might work at?
Right. I think it really depends. I think like we discussed, there are really like pros and cons to both. From what I've been looking, from what I've noticed, like other designers or when I started, it seems like it's kind of a bit easier to start at a startup, where it's kind of maybe smaller company for whatever reason. And it definitely has some downside where like what I've mentioned, that is that maybe you have to seek for a mentor outside of that, outside of your work, and you don't necessarily have the design team that will help you, and you learn from your peers. So I feel like there's definitely a downside there, but I feel like sometimes it's easier to get started at a smaller company because they don't have the financial resources to hire someone who has a lot of experience. Sometimes they'll give a chance to junior designers. And well, that's great for us, for people who get started, definitely. But I think that's my biggest advice of someone who decides to go for a smaller company and who is junior, is to try to like kind of create this support system outside. Like I know that for personally, that's been like really important to get involved into UX groups and to continue to kind of stay aware of what's happening in terms of UX, and to seek like mentorship or just like peers. I've also recently kind of kicked off or built with other people this book club where we meet and we read about UX. So that's been like really nice to be able to do that, because then I don't have a team like within the company, but then it's nice to be able to have that. So
yep,
I think there's definitely pros and cons for both. I think ideally that would be really nice for a junior designer to like start at a larger company and have all this team or those colleagues to learn from. But in terms of opportunities, like waiting for that opportunity to get started at, I don't know, Netflix or like Google, I think it will be a lot more competitive, and that may be harder, unfortunately.
Yep. Yeah, I think it's hard to give like a blanket response, right, for this. Like, I think it's very personal and unique to like what you need, what you want, what's important to you, what do you value at this stage in your career. I totally agree with your points though, in that like sometimes it's just easier to get started in a smaller place and you can like grow and like learn really quickly at a startup kind of environment and get some good experience under your belt. I mean, that's how I got at Uber eventually, to be honest. Like that's what worked for me, is joining this small startup at Atomic and getting some experience, getting exposed, while being really connected to the design community and like trying to grow my skills and have that guidance and mentorship as much as possible to eventually feel like I was in a good place to start, you know, applying for a larger place. So yeah, hard to say, like give a global answer for everyone, but hopefully that gives some people some things to think about.
Yeah, definitely. I think it really depends where people are at in their career, and also like, sorry, I got distracted by the link.
Oh no, it's okay. I was just sharing links to your stuff.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, where you're at in your career and what kind of opportunities you have.
Yeah,
you have the opportunities to choose.
Yeah. Cool. Okay, let's head into Q&A. And yeah, I realize we're getting close to time, so if people have to drop off, that's fine. I wanted to make sure I shared your links before people started hopping off. You didn't mention at the beginning that you also have a YouTube, did you?
Yeah, no, I didn't mention it. I'm still like new to YouTube. I started in January, so I forgot to mention it. Yes, I do some YouTube videos for more junior designers who want to get started. Sometimes I do tutorials too, so if you want to subscribe.
Awesome. Yeah, I put the link to your YouTube there. People should definitely go subscribe. Okay, some of the questions. I don't think we're going to be able to get to all of these, but let's see. There was a question around how do you find time to both design and do user research? I think like this might be more of a question for you, Audrey, because I feel like for me at a large company, we do have like dedicated researchers, you know, that I can depend on and rely on to go and do that part of the design process. What does it look like for you in a startup where you don't have that resource?
I think like in terms of balancing time, I don't do everything at the same time. Like I was saying a bit earlier, I have weeks where it's kind of a rush. We really need to develop that feature, or even like sometimes it happens like I forgot to design a screen, like an error screen or whatever, and development will be like, okay, like we need that to keep going. So I need to just like drop everything and do that. So that kind of just takes sometimes my workflow. But when there are moments where things are a bit slower, this is when I'll be like, okay, I'd like to do a user research project. Why do I want to learn? What would be beneficial? And this is where I take the time to like design research protocol and recruit participants and all that. But it happens that sometimes I start that and then I need to pause it a little bit. But for me, it's really important, so I try to make time for that. But I try to take advantage of the moments where it's less design heavy to get started on that. But again, it's like really like proactively. There's no one who's like, hey, Audrey, please do some user research.
Yeah. I can imagine it must be difficult to try and like figure out when and how is like the best time and place to bring that into your design process without dedicated resources.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, there was another question for you. As a design team of one, what are some avenues to get feedback from other designers or learn from others? I think you touched a little bit on this, but just wanted to give you the opportunity to share anything else.
Yeah, I think like there are really different things. We can definitely hire someone that you look up to, that you like their work. I try to follow designers that I really like and who maybe have similar interests. and often they have opportunities to like consult with them for 30 minutes, like you're doing actually, Femke. So so that can be like a really nice opportunities to get other people to look at your design. But I know that there's a lot of like UX communities who now are like fully online. I guess it depends which cities you live in. But I know that in LA, there's like a couple of user UX groups. Yep. And I used to join in person, and sometimes they would have like portfolio reviews. You could go there.
Cool.
And if there's not, I would suggest you hop on those like channels and ask, are there anyone who's interested into doing like reviews or creating like a peer group, and then you can build like your own kind of like little group.
Totally.
I know like of a couple, the most active one that I'm part of is Hexagon UX.
Yeah, I've heard of that one.
Yeah. But it really depends. Sometimes I suggest like to look at something more local, because it's nice to be able to go in person if you can.
Yeah, post-COVID times, ideally, but
yeah.
Cool. And then there was a question around like, how, if at all, does your startup give you time to learn and grow? Is that something that you like carve out time for? Is that something that's supported? Or I can imagine in a startup environment, it's like go, 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 right? Like projects are like, the turnaround time's really fast. It's like, we got the next thing, like constantly moving on to new work. How, if at all, do you find time to like grow in that?
Yeah, I think it depends of different startups. I know that especially for agencies, it's like, okay, you're done with that project, you need to move on to this other. I know that for my company, since I was staff on this particular project and I got to live more of those like ebbs and flows of work, I took again the time where maybe it was a little bit more quiet to like research things, organize my design work, and like that opportunity to slow down and grow. But also there are things that will happen outside of my work, like post hours, like this book club that I'm part of, like it's not part of my work. I'm not like paid for that. So I consider that just like beneficial to my work and like personally as a designer. So like I'll try to make time for that into like my personal time as well. But again, I feel like, I don't know if that's the same into a larger company, but I feel like there's not, I think it depends on the company culture, I should say, but there's not like a ton of oversight on my work and my schedule. Like my team wants the work to be done and they're following my progress, but they're not like, Audrey from like 10 to 12, you know, what are you doing exactly?
Right. Yeah, hopefully they're not like that.
Or they pop on Figma and like you see their little dot.
Yeah.
So I feel like my schedule is really like self-paced. So I think that's one thing is that I have to be good at, is trying to manage my time effectively.
Yeah. I find I just naturally learn a lot through like working with my peers, like working with my design peers. I just learn so much from them. So it just feels like a constant kind of learning experience. So yeah, for me, I guess it's like more embedded into how I work in my design process. I got a question for me, which is asking any advice for a junior designer joining their first design team at a large company. I think my general advice here would be to just stay really curious, like ask a lot of questions. Don't be afraid to meet other people in the company, like ask questions. I think like that's always a really nice way to approach joining any new company, really, but especially at a large company when I'm sure things are very overwhelming and there's like so much going on when you first join. And so people won't expect you to be a rock star designer from day one. We actually find it generally takes about 3 months for a new person to like just get onboarded and feel comfortable and up to speed that they can then start producing work. So yeah, just use the time to stay curious, join a lot of design reviews, talk to a lot of designers, try and learn and understand like what's been done before, what's going on now. And I think like you'll be fine. So that would be my advice.
Yeah, I feel like that's really good information. That's good to know that when you're hired for those big companies, they're not expecting you to, this expression, like hit the ground running.
Yeah. No, it takes time for sure. Cool. We had another question. I think we might have time for one more, this last one. Do you complete technical requirements and limitations before the design, or do you have to find them out for yourself? So I think this is kind of asking maybe a little bit if you can touch on your collaboration, I guess, with engineering and product, like how do you get the requirements from them to make informed design decisions?
I think it's not like one or the other. I'll get a little bit of information before, and then sometimes I propose like certain solutions or what we're thinking of, and they'll tell me if there's certain limitations to that. There's like the development team, which is more like hands-on working on the platform, but there's also a person, I guess he's like a chief engineer.
Yeah.
I'm not sure about like the positions, but like that's the person who's doing like the whole architecture of the back end. And it's really this person who is more involved on the day-to-day with us. And this person will tell us, you know, we can't do that, or we've already planned for that, so that's fine. You can go ahead and design this. So yeah, I would say that sometimes I'm aware of the requirements before, and sometimes it's kind of like by mistake, like I do something and it's like, no, that's actually not really possible. So it depends.
Yeah, we try to find out as much as possible up front. But yeah, there's always, I feel like, a moment where we realize something later on in the design process, or sometimes even when handoff happens, which we try to avoid as much as possible. But yeah, we always try to kick projects off together as a whole team. So everyone's on the same page. Everyone has a chance to voice their concerns, requirements, constraints, questions, so that we're all kind of on the same page and can design the best experience, basically.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, we're kind of at time, which is awesome. Any other last words or things you wanted to share, Audrey, before we kind of wrap this up? I'm going to share your links again to your different social channels.
Well, yeah. So, well, thank you for having me. It was really fun, really interesting conversation, because I feel like there were a lot of questions that were answered that I was also wondering as someone who so far hasn't worked for a larger company. So that was really interesting. And yeah, thanks for everyone for being there. It's fun.
Cool. Yeah. Thank you so much for joining this stream. It was super awesome to have this conversation. And thank you to all of you who joined, for listening in on a Friday. Really, really appreciate it. Hopefully you found this really helpful. If you have any follow-up questions, you can follow Audrey there on Instagram and ask her there. You probably know where to find me. And this is recorded, so I'll be publishing this. If you want to like look back, if you missed something, if you came in late, or you want to share this with a friend, I will share out the recording link probably sometime next week. But otherwise, enjoy your weekends, and thank you so much for joining. This was so fun.
Right.
All right. See you,
Happy
Audrey.
Friday, everyone.
Happy Friday. Bye.